So thank you, everybody. Good evening. My name is Gary Vogren of Kaiser Vogren Design. We are land planners, landscape architects, local to Franklin, and are the applicant representing our client, Boyle Investment Company, of which are the owners developers of Berry Farms. Thank you for your time this evening as we present the Berry Farms Town Center PUD amendment request. I would like to set out a few ground rules for this call just to keep it flowing smoothly and streamlined and avoid talking over each other. So thank you. We respectfully request that videos be turned off through the presentation and be on mute, please. Request that all questions be sent through chat, and we can answer questions as well at the end of the session as well. The chat portion is located in the top right-hand corner of the GoToMeeting. You can just type in questions there, and we'll kind of post them and go through those. This meeting is being recorded and posted on the city's website as noted in our notification mailing. Please allow us to run through this meeting and present the project and the details and some imagery, some graphics, and then we'll offer some chat questions and Q&A afterwards. The meeting will be a maximum of an hour if it's required. So thank you, I'll appreciate it. First off, trust all is well, and we welcome you to this neighborhood meeting regarding the proposed continued involvement of the successful development of Berry Farms unique to the city of Franklin. On the call, we have members of the design team and developers of the project, City of Franklin Planning, and potentially city officials also present on the call. So the agenda, I'll just go through that real briefly. So the introduction, talk a little bit about the process that we're going through and what we have to go through the city of Franklin as part of this PUD amendment. Show you the master plan and some graphics, some imagery, illustrative master plans as well. Get into Q&A afterwards. So first off, the process. This neighborhood meeting is required because we have submitted for a PUD development plan amendment rezoning. The PUD development plan amendment would allow for additional residential and commercial square footage on the currently undeveloped properties of Berry Farms Town Center, which is about 31 acres. I'll get into the plan specifics as we get into this. We submitted this PUD amendment on June 28th of this year for a tentative Franklin Municipal Planning Commission meeting on August 26th of this year. The Franklin Municipal Planning Commission will at that time vote on this PUD amendment and rezoning, and we hope to make the decision of recommendation of approval to move on to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen for 3 more readings, with one being a public hearing, tentative through November of this year, and hopefully obtain final approval before any construction can take place. So this is more just the master plan, design intent, and get through that process. You can follow the City of Franklin calendar of events if you wish to be part of these meetings, as they are all public. In addition to this neighborhood meeting tonight, we will also be holding an in-person neighborhood meeting with the Berry Farms residents on Thursday, July 15th at the Gateway Franklin Church at 1288 Lewisburg Pike, which is in close proximity to the Berry Farms on Lewisburg Pike. So you should be getting a notice from the HOA and from from Boyle Development as well, so keep an eye for that. But the intent is to re-envision the remaining 31 acres of the Berry Farms Town Center to make improvements to design concept plan that is approximately 16 years old. We were part of that process back in the day as well. The market and relevant trends that govern the development have changed, and Boyle, as a long-term owner of commercial mixed-use properties, is looking to help Berry Farms Town Center finish out strong and be relevant. Close out this. If you can mute yourself, CS, please. Okay, so I'll get into the first slide here. So this plan on your screen was the original plan back in 2005, which is basically my teenager. I've been working on this project with the Boyle team since then. And for reference, blue is office, orange is retail, brown is residential mixed use, yellow are single family lots. So this plan came in, back in 2005. A lot of things have changed since then, and this plan, I'll just highlight a few things on this plan that was approved back then, and we've been working off this plan since then. This is the first time we've come back to make a major change upon this 31 acres. So on this plan, you can see there's some large just for reference, you can see the orange building here. This is Publix. We've got Lewisburg Pike to the left, Goose Creek to the south, bottom of the page, 5 Mile Creek. But as you can see, the Publix in the middle here and all the single family in yellow that's been built out, blue in office. But you can see a lot of the orange big box retailers that were once thought at that time to be something to be part of the master plan, which are really non-existent these days, given the environment. The seas of parking that are in front of that, just the disjointedness of the retail and from the office. Large seas of parking along section 4 along Goose Creek Parkway as well. You can also notice that the main open space, in addition to that's already built, but in the central portion, the central open space is really relegated to boulevards and corridors, and we'd like to change that on the new plan to really create pocket parks and formal seating areas and plazas in addition to what's already been built at Berry Farms, which has been successful. As I mentioned, the office and the retail are kind of disjointed from all the other elements. We'd like to come in with a mixed use, more pedestrian friendly element in this portion of the project, much like it has been built in the village. On this plan, back in the day, we showed a big sea of parking in the corner here. We kind of cleaned up this zone in terms of creating a more pedestrian street. So that was a change that's significant today as well. You'll also notice a hint of a overpass here over I-65. Back in the day, we knew it was coming. The idea was schematically shown on this document, but as we know, this could be coming to fruition. So this portion of the project is also going to be discussed as well. So this is the current plan that we have submitted to the city in terms of the overall development. A lot of this is built. Like I said, we're going to be focusing on 31 acres, and I'll show you in a second, but just want to highlight a couple things. We've got the Publix, we've got the Residence Inn that's built, the 1 and 2 town center office buildings, the Lee Company, TBC, and a majority of the parcels along Goose Creek, as well as the Brown here that's currently under construction for section 11. So this really starts to show that the buildings are breaking down into smaller modules. They're not big box like I showed. The parking is more centered along the back of the buildings, behind the buildings, more pedestrian parallel parking along the street to just create a better mixed use environment. So this, if you look at these plans back and forth, it's just, there's a difference in terms of just the layout of the plan in the centerpiece predominantly, and also along Goose Creek. So this is the area that we're focusing on in terms of a mixed use environment. As I mentioned, we're focused on the 31 acres here within the red zones. It's a more integrated plan in terms of mix of uses, pedestrian streetscapes, and the creation of little pocket parks. We're showing little areas here of activation for this zone. I'll zoom in here quickly on this enlargement as well. So what we're requesting is basically an addition of approximately 400 residential units and plus or minus 151,000 of commercial uses. It basically displays some of that retail big box element that I showed you on the previous slide and incorporated it into this master plan. These uses are spread over a series of multiple buildings as opposed to massive buildings that were shown on the previous plan. But on this plan, we're showing the orange buildings are mixed use, which offer an opportunity for commercial on the ground floor to activate the streetscape and create a pedestrian feel, but also allow for use of residential or office above. So those orange buildings, flanking the streets here along this portion of the project we like to really animate the streetscape and allow the opportunity and flexibility of residential and commercial above. Also showing 2 parking structures in this section of the quadrant within blocks D and C to assist with the parking amongst the shared uses and relegate surface parking to the back to create that very strong pedestrian streetscape. These 2 orange buildings here are C5 and C6 are predominantly commercial, And all these buildings range in from stories from 1 to 6, so we're kind of keeping in massing in terms of the overall scale for the project that you've seen out there currently built. The brown buildings are additional, just straight up residential, varying in heights, matching the current character of what's being constructed out there today. As you can see, section 11 right here, this zone is currently under construction, and that was about 318 units. So we're adding another 400. So we're kind of using that same mass of units, but constructing it in a more kind of mixed use environment within this proposed section. Moving over to the office piece, near Lee Company and TBC and One Town Center, we're proposing 3 Town Center adjacent to the existing 2 Town Center with a parking structure ranges in size from 3 to 6 stories with ground plane retail and opportunities for office above. But this plan kind of showcases the area in particular that we're specifically requesting an amendment to. This 31 acres to show a mix of uses, ground floor retail with residential or office above, and or straight up residential. I'm going to just, seeing a plan is one thing, but I'm just going to share a quick video of an overview snapshot of the project just to show massing and scale and character and focus in on some of the amenities as well. So give me a second while I show this and make sure this shows up. So this starts to show just the character of Berry Farms, as you know today, and its kind of place in the world and location, use it for marketing, but we'll get into some graphic illustrations. So again, we're not talking about Chadwell and Reeves Fleming at this time. We're talking about the town center here up to the top. Shows the current master plan, current entitlements for the project, mix of office, retail, and residential. So this plan kind of merges the existing town center village along Goose Creek and Lewisburg and drops in the proposed elements in the backdrop, along with some other ancillary retail up front, but it shows the massing of the buildings filled out in the middle there towards the top. Zooming around back again towards the town center piece of the Lee Company to the left, One Town Center, and then shows the massing and the central core of the residence in the middle. This is 2 Town Center, just finished up on the roundabout coming into the project. 2 Town Center with 3 Town Center behind it in Lee Company. It just shows the flavor and character that we're trying to do and produce on the project. The residence in existing, and then the backdrop of the future mixed use 31 acres that we're talking about doing. This is a snapshot of what's currently under construction right now with the residential above and some retail ground floor. The new pocket park, adjacent Publix, and the future commercial buildings. Same thing, pocket park next to Publix. This is all under construction on the left with the new images to the right. And back to Publix with the park in the foreground. Just trying to reinforce this traditional streetscape and character throughout the project and really enhance what's already been done today. All right, I'll minimize that. Okay, so I'll just go through a few precedent images here. Talk about some of the pocket parks here that we'd like to animate and amplify within the project. This bottom left picture is currently under construction in section 11 with the multifamily, the future pool within the multifamily. A snapshot of the ground floor retail with some residential or office above. Again, pocket parks, green space, open spaces are very integral to the master plan, so we'd like to amplify that and really activate in addition to what's already out there now. So these are just kind of some snapshots of some other projects Boyle has done as well as we have studied and or seen, but really want to animate some of these pocket parks and local greens and plazas to really activate the streetscape with a series of maybe some food truck courts, outdoor seating, synthetic turf, string lights, just to animate areas where social gatherings and outdoor picnics and airstreams as part of these open space projects and get them programmed as part of the overall development. Talk a little bit about the greenway system. As you well know, there's a good portion of that already built. The green is existing. We'd like just like to connect the dots in terms of the red and the blue and the central portion here. That's part of this new 31 acres coming in, being amended. We've got the Lewisburg Trail connecting to the town center at the corner here and traverses through. We'd like to connect those dots back to the green line that circumvents behind the office campus. So activating all these corridors is very important as part of the project. So getting back to some of the building massing, this shows an aerial campus view of what's currently built and or under construction. So as you can see in the foreground, we've got the town center with the Publix. And then this piece right back here is what is currently under construction with the residential and some retail components. This area portion in red is the new amendment as part of this process that we're showing a integrated mix of buildings and uses, denoting the 400 units and the plus or minus 150,000 square feet in this zone in multiple buildings and multiple sizes from 1 to 6 stories. And you can see the Lee Company and One Town Center behind that as well. This kind of zooms in by the Pocket Park and existing section 11 under construction by Publix as well. And this is just a snapshot of the style and character of the buildings. Really want to enhance the flavor of what's out there now, but these need to be all detailed out and go through the city review process. This is just showing the city what the design intent and meeting the pattern book at that time as well. Make sure those characteristics meet those elements. Getting into some architectural character. This kind of speaks to, we're not talking about these heights, obviously, but more about the style and character and fenestration and architectural features that animate a building and create a great streetscape. The building on the upper left has some ground floor elements, but the use of the architectural styles in keeping with the development. This upper building to the upper right here is unique in terms of something we'd like to see with a activated ground floor use with office or residential above, but drop the levels of the building so you have a centerpiece that's the element of the building, but stretch out some one-story retail with above second level amenity portion of the building. Animate some of the building characteristics on the bottom left to some park elements, string lights, outdoor seating, dining plazas, as well as just animate the streetscape. Snapshot of some of the residential characters. Some of these are built on the project, as you see today. Just want to maintain that character, but show that we want to carry on that tradition of the character of the architecture and the vision of Berry Farm since it was started in 2005. With ground floor retail potential in some of these uses in addition to just straight up residential. So a combination of both, but integrating all these uses within this zone. Wanted to go back one slide, just talk about the amenities that I skipped over and meant to mention. So as part of this project, we show the pool here and some of the amenities. As part of these new amenities, our new residential units, new amenities will be constructed and will not be using the existing amenities out there today. So just want to point that out. So, so the intent is to kind of take this through the city of Franklin and obtain your feedback, have another meeting next week in person. But that's kind of the end of this presentation. And I'd like to see what kind of chats we have and questions. So I'll kind of go through those chats first and then maybe catch up on some of the questions. Will the bridge be completed over the creek at Village Plains? So that's this bridge right here. That bridge will have to be part of this discussion with the city of Franklin. That'll be shown on the plan. So that'll be integral to this connectivity within the project, Don. So yes.
Hey Gary, let me start with a few. I've been tracking these as they're coming in.
Sure.
So the first question is, the amount of apartments being built today originally increased from the original PUD development plan?
No, the original apartments that are being built today were per the approved master plan of 2005. So we are adding, in addition to these units here within this portion of 31 acres.
And hey guys, Gary and Katie, this is Adam Ballish with Will Investment Company. I apologize for the small screen view I've got here. It's not very up close and personal by any means. But thanks everybody for showing up tonight. KBD obviously has been involved with this project for going on almost 20 years, going back to when Will first started master planning this project, and we're now looking at least Berry Farms Town Center, the idea of finishing off a project. And so we typically are looking at each of these quadrants of the interstate interchange as about a 10 to 20 year project. And so obviously we will see multiple ups and down cycles through that. Many of you all sat through revisions to our Chadwell plan that we discussed about this time last year, or started discussing it last year, and had public meetings in the barn last year. This is a similar process to that, in that we're looking at how to best use the remaining portions of land, and really take a look at advancing the plan to something that we didn't think was necessarily possible originally. You'll see several braze structured parking garages in this plan as opposed to surface parking. That allows for a different style of development where we're integrating some uses vertically instead of horizontally. But it's something that we're continuing to look at improving upon, much like Gary showed the layouts down near Tito's and some of those changes from the pond going up to Publix and so on and so on. So just a couple of comments, as I've seen several questions pop up, and we'll try to go through each and every one of those. But wanted to make one clarification with regard to the term multifamily. Right now, the City of Franklin zoning ordinance classifies multifamily as anything that is attached residential of more than 4 units. So that could be townhomes, it could be condos, it could be a apartment project. Anything that is residential that is more than 4 units is a multifamily project. So if you think about the condo buildings, can you go to the character images for a minute, Gary, on page, that one page down, the residential? So the images on the upper right, the lower left, and lower right are all images of existing product in Berry Farms that are multifamily. So just because we have the term multifamily does not mean that it is going to be an apartment project versus various other projects that may be for sale. So really the goal through this rezoning is to take a look at the land use. And as Gary pointed out previously, the land use was really dominated by big box retail. So think Dick's or Steinmart or something like that were on that original plan adjacent to the creek. Most of you guys are probably shopping online or shopping much differently than when this plan was created 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And so as we look at finishing up this project, we're looking at those land uses and how to integrate into a more vibrant mixed-use community. And we as long-term owners feel that the addition of residential units, whether they are for sale or for rent, is a positive for the kind of commercial mixed-use neighborhood that we're trying to create here at Berry Farms Town Center. So just wanted to count some of these terms, multifamily, with kind of going back to the City of Franklin zoning ordinance to kind of clarify that. And then one thing that Gary didn't speak to that we're happy to answer in more detail as well is the northeast corner. If you could go to the map.
Yeah, I meant to get into that. There you go.
As Gary mentioned before, when the plan was first done, we had a dash line over there. That has now really come into to the mix in a more meaningful way with an overpass. You know, that was not really sure at the time if that was going to be an overpass or underpass and how it impacted the property over there. So seeing as the property will be fairly significantly impacted with that right of way and the heights and grades of that, it will not become an area that's very integrated into the project. So we have asked, as part of this zoning effort, to divorce that area from the PUD, and that would just fall back to the city of Franklin's zoning of whatever is in their what's called Envision Franklin in that land use policy there. So that was just one thing to break out and to further explain. So Katie, I'll turn it back to you guys and let you guys kind of scroll through all these numerous questions. And one last thing, and hopefully everybody's received notice of this, but we will host at least one in-person public meeting next week. If we find that that's really wildly attended and that there's a ton of questions, we're more than happy to host another in-person meeting, and certainly want to give everybody an opportunity to be heard and ask questions, more so than what may be provided for in this session with the city tonight. That's only an hour.
Correct. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, so getting back to this parcel to the northeast corner, in the previous plan, we showed a hint of that overpass, and this is more of a refinement of that, showing the laneage and how it goes over Interstate 65. But as part of this PUD amendment, we are also divorcing, so to speak, this plus or minus 25 acres from the PUD and going to a straight up RC6 commercial rezoning element as well. So that'll be part of this process as well. But I'll go ahead and start addressing some of these questions as well.
Yeah, and Gary, I think there's a few more questions just about this parcel. So while we're on the topic, one of the questions is, who is controlling the property now that we're, quote unquote, removing it from the PUD? If you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, that property will still be under the ownership of Boyle, so they'll have control of that property, and this gives them flexibility in terms of that zone along the interstate in terms of its use, because it's not so disjointed from the project. It was a standalone office building, as you can see on this plan here. Office building and a parking lot that, adjacent to that flyover is just not so much tied to the plan. So this gives an opportunity to come in something different. But
and we also, through the process, have felt fairly confident that we didn't need to necessarily weigh down the POA or even the HOA's component of the POA with additional, taxes and upkeep of a parcel that's really not contributing, so to speak, to the PUD. So that was another consideration.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so I'll go through some of these questions.
Yeah, so Gary, why don't you or Adam talk about buildings being apartments or for sale units? I think Adam touched on it a little bit, but if you can talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think this time what I mentioned earlier was that if you look at these buildings that are all, kind of orangish in color, and then you look at the index, and I know that may be hard to see, the index for orange is mixed use, and that basically allows for residential to be above commercial as an option, or it could be that office is above retail. And so the D3 building is an example. If you could highlight that, Gary, in the lower left, that could be a building that is got residential over it, and is a building much like the Soulshine Pizza building, but has residential over retail instead of office over retail. Or this plan provides the flexibility that could be office over retail instead of residential over retail. So there is an overall unit count that is being proposed of 406 units. That does not mean that's 406 apartments. Much like when you go back to the original quotes within the original approved PUD from 2005, I believe the number was roughly like 645 units or something like that were approved, of which now we have built, or are in the process of building, 331 that are apartments, and there's about an equivalent number that are individually owned, whether they're condos, townhomes, or single family. And so We would envision a similar mix moving forward, that there's opportunities for sale and for rent product. At this point, we haven't necessarily figured out what that mixture would be. In addition to that, I saw several questions with regard to amenities. Any new residential product that is created will not be using any of the existing plunge or folly amenities at Berry Farms Town Center. So they would have their new own amenities. There's a few areas highlighted on this plan to show like where those could conceivably be. Gary, if you just highlight those 4 little amenity zones. Obviously, the trail system is kind of open to the public, so to speak. And then as would be the pocket parks. There was an image earlier on the screen of our project at McEwen. Several of you all may have visited there recently, but is an area where, unlike the silo and the park at Hughes Crossing near Publix, that's just kind of passive, we have really begun to try to integrate uses within these parks to activate them a little bit more. And I think that's something that you'll see come to fruition with this newer plan as we look at these open spaces and green spaces. There were some questions in here with regard to pickleball and trails near the barn. I think those are some very good points that we can take a look at, what is being created. On the Chadwell project that's to the southwest of the interstate interchange, we are proposing pickleball courts there as well as some soccer fields. And that is, that will be maintained as part of Berry Farms and will be open to the public for your all's use as well. And certainly want to create a kind of a fabric of amenities that everyone can use, with the exception of the pools, which we will not suggest anybody add to your all's current load on those 2 projects.
Thank you, Adam.
What else, Katie, as far as
Thanks,
questions?
Adam. Yeah, so next question, is there any additional work being completed outside of the red dotted line? So if you can speak to that, Gary.
No, we are focused on this red zone right here as part of this neighborhood meeting and planned PUD amendment. So we're just focusing on this area only as part of this revision to this plan on this Berry Farms Town Center.
And I do think, for clarification, the notices probably went out to everybody in Berry Farms as opposed to just, if you live within 500 feet.
That's right. Yep. It's the external boundaries of Berry Farms.
And Adam, I think you hinted at this or mentioned this earlier, but one question is, how much of the mixed use is designated for restaurants?
Yeah, so of the commercial that is being proposed, we have several 100,000 square feet of commercial left. What is shown as being added that Gary mentioned of about 150,000 feet more or less is meant to offset the square footage from a couple of the original hotels. So there was a bit of a clerical snafu, if you will, with some of the takedown charts that the city has us monitor. And originally, hotels were listed as a permissible use, but were not counted as part of our commercial square footages. So as we went through the process, the commercial square footages of the hotels were counted. And as such, there's about 250,000 square feet of hotels that are built at Berry Farms in the 3 hotels. But the math was never caught up to reflect that. So the plan is really not changing that much from a commercial standpoint compared to what's historically been shown from a count. And we would expect from a retail to office standpoint that there's probably no more than a quarter of the remaining square footage dedicated to retail compared to office. And of that retail, I would think that no more than half of that would be restaurant compared to retail shop space. And I know that's somewhat confusing, but our goal, if you could go to the next slide, Gary, or the blow up slide, is to integrate some restaurants into some really key areas within and surrounding some of the open green spaces. So like the D2 building as an example, or the C1 building kind of being close to the main drive over to the traffic light that I think Don Harlan was asking about. And same thing with integrating some restaurant and retail into what we call Section 10, which is east of Residence Inn. So would really like to integrate some retail in that zone so that it makes it a little easier for the office users to go lunch, and that they don't necessarily have to get in their car and drive to Tito's, as an example, to help with that dispersion of traffic.
Yeah, and also I think residential along that office corridor, also to integrate those uses and walkability to the offices and to the retail with those buildings A and B.
Yeah, and one other point on that zone in particular that we felt we were pretty excited about as we started studying this plan. If you go back to the original plan, Gary, there is a parking lot basically directly across the street from Tennessee Baptist Convention. And so, from the pool looking south, you really are just seeing into a very large parking lot that's probably about twice the size of Publix's parking lot. So what we are proposing in the new plan is to line the northern portion of this with residential to really begin to break up that parking lot, have a much more pedestrian scale in that zone. So,
yeah,
get a little off track on some of these things.
No, that's fine. That's the whole point. We want to discuss how these buildings are interspersed and create multi-level buildings with interconnected walkability and mix of uses. There's a question about the residential in Flemings. That's the Reeves-Flemings tract. That's not within the scope, but if Adam, if you got those numbers, that's fine. But that's something in addition to what we're doing here.
There's currently 400 residential units approved on Reeves-Fleming. There's currently approximately 1,650 residential units approved on Chadwell, which is between, we have not started, that's between Stream Valley and this project. And then there's Berry Farms Townsend.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And this question, Max Thompson, was also about the pool and the number of units, and Adam kind of spoke to that about that any new residential units that are part of this master plan will have their own amenities, and we've kind of keyed this on this plan here, your A and B, but also supplementals and plazas and open space and parks. There's a question about a dog park being considered. I think that's definitely an option as part of some of these open space elements, but if there's something, Adam, you want to add to that, but we really try to create these focal open spaces at key intersections and outside of mixed-use buildings to provide these opportunities for different amenities.
We've been talking about a dog park for some time, and we are hopeful to announce a dog park here soon that would actually not be part of this project, but be part of the ongoing construction project. That would be a small off-leash park for dogs. So that's something that we hope to be able to share in more detail soon.
Thanks, Adam. What building is 6 stories was the next question. So could be up to 6 stories, would be building C5 and C6. And
Plus 3.
Plus this building over here called 3 Town Center.
And that's, clarify, that's not a change from what's in the current approvals.
Say that again, Adam.
Just to clarify, that's not a change from what's in the current approvals.
That's correct. So that's the element of 6-story buildings are those 3 buildings there, C5, C6, and the proposed 3 Town Center. So this question about residential apartments on this side of Goose Creek plus another 16 on the other side of the road is going to be about 4,000 people in our new neighborhood. Yeah, so we're adding some residential here. This is an overall 600-acre master plan component. As part of this process, we work with the City of Franklin and their traffic consultant, as well as our consultant and our team looking at the numbers. But the positive thing about this plan here is that the integration of mixed uses, typically allows for a less traffic flow in and out of the project, given its walkability, mixture of uses, both vertically and horizontally. So that's always a positive.
And Gary, I'll touch on that briefly. The Chadwell project, many of you may have sat through some of those meetings, but may or may not have followed where that went. ultimately for approvals. Just to highlight, that is different from the project we're talking about now. But as part of the Chadwell project, there are additional laneage and road improvements to Goose Creek Bypass. So there will be another lane added to Goose Creek Bypass, as well as additional turning lanes near the interstate off-ramps or on and off ramps, as well as additional laneage improvements at Lewisburg and Goose Creek Bypass. So you'll see quite a bit of off-site improvements that we are making, and those actually are coinciding with some stuff that another developer is making for the project that has started site work. I believe it's called Southbrook down near Stream Valley. The other thing to highlight with regard to traffic is that we're working with the city now to quantify these numbers, but the original plan that Gary showed to start the presentation that had these large big box retailers, we mentioned that we are swapping out some of that land for residential. It will actually be a decrease in traffic compared to what was originally approved because of the switch in uses. And as you can imagine, a regional shopping destination may generate a different traffic pattern compared to somebody driving back and forth to their house. So we'll work closely with the city on that, because that's something that we want to be very mindful of as well, including making sure that we're making improvements to the intersections like Village Plains that doesn't extend into Berry Farms now across the creek, and that we're providing additional means of ingress and egress to stoplights so that there is not quite the bottleneck that could exist at Captain Freeman or at Berry Farms Crossing.
Good point. Next question was about the greenway at the terminal, the end of the HOA party barn. Will it have a better general public access to the sidewalks? Again, that's a global effect in terms of just connectivity of the project. So that's something that, is part of the connectivity of the sidewalks and the greenway system to kind of make it all whole in terms of a pedestrian environment. Talked about the bridge. We talked about the pickleball courts and things of that nature. Are always opportunities for some of these pop-up parks and these corner elements on the streets and interior pocket parks. Is there a document that correlates the building details and the plat you provided? Yes, all these plans are public. They are at the City of Franklin, but we can also discuss it at the future meeting at the Berry Farms residents meeting next week. But all these plans are submitted and formalized at the city, so those can be seen and all the data information is shown. Next question is, it would be nice to have a path along Old Paynesville Road to connect to the one along Lewisburg.
So just to step in there, Gary, the City of Franklin is part of the flyover for the Pratt Lane connector or whatever. The city will be upgrading Old Paynesville Road to city standards. I believe that at least has sidewalks on both sides of the road, if I'm not mistaken, and that will, I think, is supposed to start construction in 2023 and be completed by 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So that pedestrian connection would be made along Old Paynesville Road at that time.
Thank you, Adam. Question about the large parcel to the right, upper right. We talked about that. Yes, that piece that is kind of ghosted out will be removed from the PUD. What does that mean legally, planning wise? That's basically, we're just changing to an RC6 zoning, taking it away from the PUD, but it does stay within Berry Farms as part of Boyle Development. They control that. Same question, just answered that about the ownership. What is the plan for those multifamily? Will they be apartments or purchased? We've talked about the opportunity for various different types of residential housing. So we've gone through that. One attraction is the easy ride to I-65. Today it is easy. How many families are going to be added in the current build out? And also what this plan describes, please use percentages. I think Adam spoke to that in terms of just a mixture of just different housing products and varieties based on market demand and pending uses in terms of residential types. Will the removed PUD 25 acres have restrictions if the removal is approved by the city? No, there's no restrictions. It'll have a straight by right RC6 zoning, which is predominantly commercial uses only. for that element. You have a small percentage of residential, but in this location, it's predominantly going to be commercial. Explained that already about the 25 acres. Flexibility is all about, the flexibility to do mixed use, opportunity of ground floor commercial with residential office above. So that allows that different flexibility as part of a master plan. Talked about traffic and its mix of uses and the improvements that Adam had mentioned. The build out Adam mentioned also in terms of over the next 5 years or so for this project, this portion of the project in particular. Talked about the dog park potential, separate meetings occurring with the current commercial entities, and will their comments be made public? So we're having an additional meeting with the city, with the neighborhood next week. There's also meetings with the city that are coming up in terms of doing such a workshop, and then formal planning commission, mayor and board of aldermen. So those are all public as well. And your comments can be heard at these public meetings as well as the neighborhood meetings. So a little bit of both. Have you done an analysis on the impact of existing single home, condo, townhome value up, down, and is there a traffic impact study? We talked about that as well. So they're looking at the traffic impacts as well as improvements. We've talked about the new amenities will only have opportunity to use their new amenities only. They will not use existing amenities. The current pool plan is crazy. The one being built is tiny. Okay. There's always room for more amenities. Agreed. When is Chadwell expected to start and finish? Again, that's a different project that we're not talking about today, but that's, that's in the Boyle project list as well. Even though the new proposal does not include the other parts of Berry Farms, the residents need to understand the total picture and the number of residential units. Can you provide a summary for the next meeting? So yeah, we talked about that. This is an increase of 406 units with this development, this 31 acres in town center, and 151,000 square feet plus or minus of commercial uses just for this portion of the project. Updated graphics on Chadwell, posted the Berry Farms images. I think Boyle will take that into account. Okay. Really like the added mixed use and think that is important to the original plan. We all agree with that. Thank you. Is there a pedestrian connectivity from World Plains to Chadwell under Goose Creek Bridge? Again, that
is proposed as part of the Chadwell project.
Yes, that is proposed. Thank you, Adam, for the Chadwell project connecting the two. What specific types of retail shops are you prioritizing for future tenants in town center? Again, that's Adam talked about that a little bit about market demand and who they're trying to get in town center, but offer a variety of different retail commercial opportunities within town center, make it very diverse. Great on Paytonsville sidewalks. What about sidewalks to Publix and Sonic from Goose Creek? Currently, it's not safe to walk into the neighborhood from those entrances. I think connecting some of the dots in terms of the Greenway trails, adding some of the sidewalks in terms of the trail we talked about on this diagram, as well as connecting down to Publix. Okay. Scrolling down the comments, just make sure I get these. Is it Boyle's desire to have this done by the end of 2025? I think this is a several year build out. I think we said plus or minus 5 years for this portion of the project. Next question, do we have access to the green space and open space plans after the meeting? I live on a row of plains near the pool and playground and definitely see a need for increased play spaces. The tiny playground next to the pool is hardly sufficient for the population that will live in this quadrant of the plan. I saw folks from a hotel bringing their kids over the other day to play. I'd like to see how your planning is offering families in the new units and hotel units and hotels great spaces to conjugate and play outside the existing Berry Farm locations. Can you make designs ideas more accessible online? So that'll be noted. On this plan, we kind of show some little pocket parks and adding to the overall infrastructure of parks and amenities. So that's very important to the mixed use master plan. So we'll put that on the agenda as well. Talk about accessibility to parks. Does not help walking from Goose Creek Road. The Greenway has no impact on that question you just referenced.
Yeah, we've been through this with Mr.
Yeah.
Thompson, the engineering department before with regard to the access on Goose Creek bypass. So
Yeah.
we certainly feel we're kind of continuing to honor the layout of the Greenway Trail that was originally proposed and that connectivity. We had not really ever intended for there to be a pedestrian connection to Goose Creek bypass across the creek at the Captain Freeman entrance, but instead to divert that pedestrian access east and west onto the Greenway Trail.
Correct. Yeah, shown on the map. If you can see my line, that kind of makes that connection along that 5 mile Goose Creek to 5 Mile Creek. I think I got all the chat questions, Katie. We've got about 8 minutes left. If there's any other questions that we need to address, be happy to. And again, we'll have another meeting next week, Thursday the 15th at 6 for the Berry Farms residents to meet in person, review plans, talk about some of the things that are also asked about in this meeting as well. So any other questions? Last call. And we'll wrap this up tonight. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you for everyone's time. We appreciate it. Thank you for your involvement in the questions. Have a good evening.